Hi, everybody. I thought I would send you this little preview video um, with regards to the workshop on Thursday. And it's really just simply as we did before last week with the drawing workshop. It allowed people to maybe get some idea of what we were going to be doing, and maybe by way of a little demonstration of how we might approach it, which saves time on the day itself. So that's the most important thing. But hopefully also we'll look at a few images here and get your mind sort of tuned in and your eyes tuned in to looking for certain things. And that is what the day is all about. I've said in previous video, those of you who were at the drawing workshop, forgive me if you're hearing this again, but I'll say it again, which is we're not there to make pictures. We're there to discover things. We're there to have enjoyable experience and to learn about what's in front of us and how we can translate that, if you like, onto a piece of board or canvas. So that is our aim, and hopefully what I'm going to show you in the next short video will help that. What I'm going to do is I have taken photographs in the area. Again, those of you who were at the drawing workshop will have seen some of these, and hopefully you don't find this repetitive, but I'm going to bring them up here, and there's the first one. So this is the sort of thing we'll see when we're up there in the glen. I have encouraged people to be looking through the trees if possible, so that we can see the light coming from behind the trees, because it gives you a lovely contrast of dark and light, which is what we'll try to capture when we paint it. But if you look at this picture, there's a couple of things I want you to imagine that you're going to be looking for on the day. The first one is what I've just mentioned, which is dark and light. In other words, I would like you to be looking at what's in front of you and ask yourself, what is the darkest bit? What might be the lightest bit? And what are the bits in between, you know, a little bit darker, a wee bit lighter, all those shades of grey. Okay. The drawing workshop, we dealt with this in black and white, and in painting, we're going to partly do that as well. But have a look at that picture, as I say, even as I speak, and try to picture in your own mind, where are the darkest and lightest bits? Where might there be medium bits? And what I'm going to do now is show you pretty much the same picture again. It's zoomed out a little bit, it's a wee bit further away, but it's the same place. And it's in black and white, as you can see. So we don't have the problem of color to look at. And it's much easier to see where are the darkest bits, where are the lightest bits, where are the medium gray bits. So if we were mixing colors, or rather tones up with our paints, where would we place that gray and this gray and that black and whatever it is? So if you look at that, the reason I'm showing you is it is so much easier to see that. And on the day, you could take a photograph and turn it into black and white on your phone if you want to, if you have that facility. But what I would like you to do is try to train your brain into looking for dark and light and try to ignore color. So if we went back here to this one, suddenly all this color is in our way, you know. There's beautiful greens of different sorts and all of that. So we got to say, well, yes, it's green, but is it dark or light or medium or what? How bright is it? So that's what I want you to be thinking about on the day to begin with. So I'll move on to this one again. There's that one again. You can see much easier. I'll move to another one here. And it's, again, full of different brightnesses, light and dark and so on. But let's concentrate on this one, on the color. And obviously green is the dominant color here. But what we're hoping to do on the day, the second part of our workshop, will be painting with color, with greens or whatever colors we're looking at. And I want you to think about what we call temperature as well as lightness. In other words, in all of these greens, there are light greens and there are darker greens. So that's straightforward enough. The area here around the middle, you see this, is a lighter green than perhaps some of the greens that are way up near the top here. And there might be other greens in between. You might find that the green of this is a wee bit in the middle. But not only are they lighter and darker, but they're warmer and colder. What I mean by that is some of the greens are yellowy green. You can see over here on towards the top right. It's a yellowish green, so there's more yellow in it, obviously, around there. And there in the middle, that middle bit we talked about, it's a bluer green. It's a colder green. It's got more blue mixed in it, if you like. And then if you look down below that, you'll see some greens that are somewhere in between. So some of them are very blue, like this area. Some of them are very yellowish. Some of them are maybe slightly yellow, and so on. If you look at those areas at the bottom, you'll see colors that are that. If you see my cursor, this area here that I'm looking at, I'm bringing with the cursor, that's a wee bit warmer than that because that's a more bluish green. So not only are the greens light and dark, different shades of light and dark, but they're different temperatures. They're warm, bluey greens, and some yellowy greens, and variations of everything in between. So that's the second thing when we get later on the day, in the second part of the exercise, we're going to have a wee look at. And I'll talk about all that again, obviously. So I just wanted to give you the heads up. I think there's one more picture here to have a wee look at. And it's a good example of warm and cold greens. As it happens, if you look up and down the right-hand side, those ferns in the bottom right and the middle right here are slightly bluer green than the things that are over on the left-hand side. A lot of the left-hand side is quite a lot of yellowy flecks, yellowish green flecks as well. And there's all other things in between, of course, and there's even browns and greys in it. But we'll talk about temperature, as I say, on the day as well. So that is just a little first part heads up as to what I'm hoping to get you to look for. So we're going to be looking at different brightnesses, tone. We're going to be looking at different temperatures, bluish, cold, yellower, if you like, warm in terms of the greens that we're surrounded by. So that's the main thing. What I'm going to do now is a very short little demonstration about the way we could actually put our paint on our boards and canvases, and how do we interpret this when we see it? How do we actually get it onto the board itself? So keep watching, and that's the next thing I'm going to do. All right, so what we've got here is a simple little board, canvas board, cheap canvas board. You will notice what I've done to it is I've stained it or rubbed it with an old brush with some like grey, dirty acrylic paint on it. In other words, instead of it being pure white like this is over here in the palette, you can see it's just off-white. So if you can get a chance before the workshop, to take any boards you're bringing and stain 2 or 3 of them anyway, off-white, just a mucky grey, maybe even a mucky brown, but not white, okay? Because the reason is white glares in your eyes, and also it's very hard to measure tones against pure white, whereas when you have grey, when you put a light color down, you can see it quicker. So there's a reason for that, just not being pure white. I'm just reaching over as I speak, because what I've got here in a little tub is a little bit of turpentine, a little bit of oil. But on the day, we can just use turpentine for this exercise. And what I'm going to use to draw with, rather than maybe drawing with pencils to begin with on the board, draw with a little brush. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that close up there, the brush size. There's my finger. So it's quite a small little flat brush for this purpose. And I have a little bit of black and white paint here. These are oil paints, but again, acrylic would work fine and whatever. So what I'm going to do with a little bit of the turpentine and the little bit of black in there, you can see it's slightly diluted, not too much, and a little bit of white in there. I'm making up a a medium grey, not just enough so I can see it. And again, it can be diluted down a little bit. You can see I've added another little bit of turpentine in there. And I'm going to actually draw with that. The other thing I have in my other hand here is a rag, which is really quite important, a rag or at least kitchen rolls, so you can keep cleaning the brush so that your tones that you put down are more accurate, so you don't get a dirty brush contaminating all the other colors necessarily. So with that little bit of paint that I have on my brush, what I'm going to do is actually draw. So I'm working from one of the pictures that I showed you, and I hope it should be on the corner of your screen as you're watching this. But you can see there's the mark that my little brush makes. So I'm going to sketch in. There's a tree coming down here at a nice angle, all right, down to sort of a bank or something there. And what you'll notice, I hope, is that by painting or drawing with a brush, we can't get fiddly because it's a loose sort of a medium. You can scribble around and relax a wee bit, whereas sometimes with pencil we get a bit hung up on the thin point of the pencil. And there's a tree going up this way, look there, right to the edge. So I'm just rubbing that in just to indicate where that's going to be, because the exercise, as I mentioned, is not about drawing leaves, it's not about drawing photographic accuracy. It's about trying to observe, first of all, tone, in other words, light and shade, and second of all, different temperatures of color. So there's another little bit there. I think my wee bit there might be a wee bit too wide, but I'll keep on. Again, that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to get hung up on saying, oh my goodness, that tree is twice as thick as it should be. Try your best, but as I say, the real work for me will begin when we start applying tones into things. So I'm going to put that up there. I know that's covered in leaves, but just put it all as if I can imagine seeing it all the way up. So you have this big tree at the edge here, and you can see there's places, things that I can look at as a guideline, if you like, so I can place things around there. I'm not going to draw loads of detail because I want the block in tone as simple little jigsaw blocks rather than as I say, great vast detail. So basically when I've positioned the main parts of the picture, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to maybe do that quite soon actually. So that's just to remind me where the main bits are. I'm going to add in the other bits, the other elements shortly. So I'm changing a brush now, and I'm reaching down, I hope, to get a brush that's slightly bigger. You can see, hopefully, this is a broader brush here. You can see my hand covered in paint, of course, so you can see how much bigger that is, but it's still not, it's bigger than my fingernail, but it's not a massive brush, okay? And basically then what I want to do is think about starting the different tones, the light and shade. So observing it and saying, okay, where do I believe the darkest tones are? And of course, when you look at the photograph, you'll see that the trees probably are the deepest tone. So what I'm doing here is making a really, really dark grey, not going quite to black. I'm just going very, very dark grey. That gives me a wee bit of leeway if I want to change it. But the main thing is, let's see if I can get the atmosphere of this picture in. So I'm blocking that in with this big brush. Simple, flat block at the moment. And be fairly generous with your paints, Sometimes, I make plenty up on your palette. And then we get a dark area going way up here. Then it sort of breaks and disappears because there's leaves on top of that. So might just leave that for the moment. But down here is dark. So a few patches of dark there. Let's have a look around and say, oh yeah, well, this little tree is quite dark there. Certainly at the bottom of it, there and there. And down just below the tree, there's a darker patch there. So it's literally just a patch of color or tone. I've left that bit because when I look at it, I think that's slightly lighter. So I'll come in with that later on with a lighter tone. Then we have this great big tree here, which is generally dark, but it's lighter on the, it looks to me to be a wee bit lighter on the right-hand side, but we'll go into that later. As I say, we're looking only for the most extreme darks to begin with, because that will be our kind of guideline. We know that if we have these darks in, we can't go any darker, or we probably shouldn't. So everything else we put on should be a lighter tone, in theory anyway, you know. So when I look around, I might observe another thing. There's a big hole in the tree, or the roots away down here, just down at the bottom. I hope you see that. So the thing is, I'm not going to be able to observe every single dark area, because there's things I'm sure I'll miss. But what I'm doing is getting as many of them as I can see. And this is an exercise in constructing a tonal picture. So let's say for the moment we leave that and say, okay, where do we go next? Where are the next lighter bits? In other words, the bits that are quite dark, but you know, not black. So what I'm going to do here is make up another batch of a lighter gray. You can see that there. Maybe even not just as light as that. So you can see there's a slight difference between those two, but not much. And I'm looking around what to do. If you half close your eyes, if you squint at the image, at the photograph, it becomes easier to see the different shades. Okay, so in here, I reckon, and I'm making guesses because you have to guess and make a decision and then work with that. But in around here, down at the bottom of the picture, there's a dark area, but it's not as black or dark, as quite as dark maybe as some of the things in the tree. So, you know, I'll block that, and it sort of comes around there into like a little valley or something, I don't know. And it gets a little bit lighter there, so I'm going to leave that. And what you can do at this point, actually, which I kind of omitted to say, but if you find it easier before putting your tones down like this, if you find it easier to draw them a bit more, what I'm going to do is I'm going back to the small brush for a second, got it here, and going back to this slightly darker tone, not too dark, but thin, very, very thin. You could then say, well, look, hold on, I'll draw around the outside of the shapes of the tones. So for example, there's a whole big bunch of trees, or sorry, leaves, I should say, here, all around this area here. You see that? Don't worry about doing this because you're going to paint over it anyway. There's a whole shape of trees there. There's also, let's stand trees again, leaves all across the top of that tree trunk there. There's a big clump of them. Again, just draw that around. So if you feel happier doing that, there's a lovely light area down in there. You see that? So I can sort of draw a little shape and say, right, I'll come back to that and draw that in later. Also in there and in there, perhaps. Just about, see that? And also over here. And of course, in this space here is really, really light. Down here, actually, there's some medium tones, medium gray there. So sort of split those up. I have seen it done where people literally have painted dark, D for dark, L for light, M for medium, and things like that. And, you know, that's okay, because if that helps you understand what's going on, so be it. So once we get that, beg your pardon for knocking the camera there. Once we get that, we'll go back here to the slightly lighter or slightly darker grays, but not as dark as we started with. So in here, for instance, I said there seems to be an area that's a little bit lighter than the area over here and here. So we'll put that in, and you can see there, it's just a block of tone, no texture whatsoever. Let's look around and see if there's anything similar. Actually, I think that the leaves, some of the leaves that are up in here are like that. They're a little bit lighter, but not too much lighter than what's going on in the tree itself there. let's see if we go a wee bit lighter now. Could be then that we're adding a little more white to our mix. So we've got a lighter grey. Maybe push it a wee bit more actually. So we've got that. Don't want it to be pure white or really, really white. So I can put that in here and in here and a wee bit in there. See that? I just put that in. I didn't worry about blending it or doing anything else. It's just simply like a sausage shape, which I think is a bit lighter. And then down beside that, what I'll do, there's that really dark bit that I mentioned, and then just above it, there's a little bit lighter. So there's really dark, a little bit lighter, and quite much lighter. So what I'll do is I'll mix another batch of that slightly darker color, and it's similar to what I have here actually. If you have a palette knife, feel free to go ahead and use that. I'm perhaps being a bit lazy and using the brush to mix, but you can see here I'm putting some tone above that around there, and there's detail in there, but I'm not getting into the detail, the small shapes just yet, and maybe you don't, but we'll see how it goes, you know. So when I've got this slightly medium tone, I can see that there's a wee bit up here, you know. So as I stand here or sit here and look at that, I'm beginning to notice, oh, there's a medium bit, there's a very dark bit, there's a light bit, and so on. Let's get into these big shapes here, because they are interesting, because they are tonally slightly lighter than what's going on here, but they're still considerably darker than what's going on in there. So what I'm going to do is put the lightest bit in now. So in other words, with virtually white, but there's just enough paint on my brush here to make that dirty. In other words, not pure white. And we'll bang that in the spaces here for the moment. So I know there's lots of things going on there, but I want to simplify it into one big area at the moment, and then we can organize it later on. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is the best way to get started with a painting outside. Big areas first, small areas much later. So always block in the big obvious shapes. And you can see already, there's a bit of light in there, but I know there's leaves on top, but let's bang it in there anyway. And a wee bit of light flicking through the sides there. Look. So you can see we're now beginning to get the canvas, the board occupied. Now let's look at these things here. As I say, these are darker, of course, than what I've just done, but they're not quite as dark as some of the stuff that's going on here. So we'll take that color that I've been working at, add a little bit of black in it. We're just dealing with black and white here. We'll see. And you know, the first time you do this, it's not going to be right. I know that there's a lot of inaccuracies probably going to happen here. So I've made that a wee bit darker. I think it could be actually be tonally slightly darker again, but we'll bang that on as that big clump of leaves, okay? So it's a big solid clump that I'm banging all over the top of what I've just done there. So it doesn't look like little colored flecks of leaves at the minute. It looks like a solid box or something like that, but that's okay. We can go into that and sort that out later. Sticking with that medium gray, I'll bring a bit over there. These go right over the top of the tree trunk as well, as it happens. So I'll bang those in, trying to stay with that same similar sort of tone, at least for the moment. So bang all that in. And then that as well is a wee bit clumped down there, maybe just hanging off the end of the tree there. Another wee bit. So I'm beginning to get a wee bit fiddly here. I've got to be careful. I'm getting seduced into into looking at these things here. But you know, and the leaves go right across there. Actually, they hang right across there. But even now, I hope you can begin to see that we have been looking at the key tones, at least dark, medium, light. And even when we look at this shape, we can see a sense of the light coming through, the space that there is in there, and the contrast. And you have that to begin. That's your measuring stick. There's your framework, if you like, to begin to work with. And now, should I wish, I could begin to look at things like those leaves, the leaves in this middle area here. I know they're not all that same shade of grey, because some of them are a wee bit lighter actually. So if I lighten that up and put that on, and I know that the thing is with oils, you can put on acrylics, you can paint on top of them what you've just done. Eventually there comes a point where it's harder, but you can see now that I'm putting a few wee lighter bits, and likewise in between the tree trunk there, you can see little bits of dark peeping through there, and so on. So we're getting a wee bit more of an interest in texture there. So I'm jumping ahead to what I would be doing a wee bit later on. There's also quite a lot more leaves. I've just realized that when I've looked at this here. Down in here, look, this is all quite a lot of leaf growth going on over this tree, and on the other side of that as well. So bang that on. And then amongst that, there are some little dark bits of things hanging out. But you see what's happening? I can do that now a wee bit easier because I've got the big bits in. If I started this picture with just that tree and started going, I'll do these wee bits of grey there and I'll do that wee bit of dark in there, we would be still working in that with a big empty canvas. As it is, we have a canvas ready, a composition of some sort, and the main dark areas, medium and light areas in there. And as I look at that and I squint my eyes again, I realize, you know what? I've been very tentative. I realize that when I half close my eyes, this area here, to me, could actually come down a lot darker. So look, I'm just taking some of this almost black and saying, let's bang it down here. And always lighten it up again if I don't like it. But I realized this area is not just as delicate as I was doing it. Certainly over here, there's a lot of deeper tones going on here, you know. So that's okay. I can bang that over the top of that. And now I think that's given me a nicer sense of the floor of the forest and things there. And so that's what happens. You put down a color or a tone, then you step back and say, is it right or not? No, too light, too dark. And then you make your changes. Don't wait and mix on your palette like this and go, oh, is it that one? No. Is it that one? No. Is that, you know, and you get all these crays and think, oh, that's it. Because that will still be problematical. It's best to put something down and then work with it. So hopefully that's just a little glimpse of the sort of approach we want to take on the day. Now what I have here is actually the same painting that I was working in black and white. I've now wiped that away so we can illustrate the next part. So on top of this grey underpainting, what I've done is drawn out the same composition, this time with a bit of lighter paint on my brush so that it shows up a little bit better. But the same key trees, the tree there, here, that little one there, this great big tree there, and some of the base colour down there. So what I can do is, as we did before, look at our photograph or our scene and split it up even more. So for instance, as I mentioned in the last one, I noticed there's an area here that's very, very light. And in here, the light cracks across there. There's a wee bit of light there and there and there. But this has just been drawn as if it was a chalk or a pastel drawing at the minute. And again, we would mark out the leaves as we did before. Say there's a big clump of leaves round there coming up over all of this, up into there and over. And obviously on the day will take more time. I'm doing this so that we can get a quick snapshot. So I'm aware that I'm working very quickly really. And then down here, I have a whole clump of sort of leaves going on there and another clump here. So we'll split those up later on, but they're the main zones, if you like, in the picture. And maybe a few leaves down that side as well there. But so in other words, we've got the big shapes. This time, what we're going to try to do is not necessarily just think about dark and light, but actual color or greens. And I think what I'm doing here is I'm just going to work with greens and work with that. You can introduce other colors later, but what I mean is what I've got on my palette is blue, ultramarine blue here, some light cadmium yellow, but it can be lemon yellow or whatever, some white of course, and some crimson red. And the reason for the crimson red is twofold. One is the red will warm up the yellow, obviously, make a yellow more like orange. And when we get an orangey tone, as some of those leaves are, they're not orange, but they're a warmer color. So red warms the temperature of the green. Blue will cool it down, as we have said. White, of course, will lighten it. Now, how do we darken it? Well, when we've made a green, and if we add red into green, red will deepen the green because they're what's called complementary colors. Don't get too hung up on that. I'll explain it more on the day if needs be. A lot of you maybe already know about that, but if not, we'll see it happening, okay? So to begin with, if I start with the darkest tone, and this is where I can illustrate this actually. Sorry, that's a wee bit dirty, but we'll run with it. So the blue and a little bit of yellow in there, I'm going to make up a really deep green and quite a cold green. So there's quite a lot of blue there. Do you see that? So that's a very dark color, but it's not maybe as dark as I want it for the trees. So rather than introducing other colors today and black and all sorts of things like that, if I add a little smidgen of this crimson red into that green, I don't know if you can see it on your camera, on your monitor there, but it darkens it and takes the green out of it so that it nearly becomes a super dark gray, which is a lovely color for putting some of these things in. So it's not a vibrant green, but it's not just black. So it's kind of nice color to use. Put a wee bit more blue in there. So really what we've got is the three primary colors here, red, yellow, blue, all mixed together. So we make this lovely dark tone. And we'll put that in as we did before with the tonal thing, only this time we're using color to mix the tone. So I'm putting that in. I know there's leaves going to be there this time, so maybe this time what I'll do is leave the gaps for the leaves. A wee bit more in there, a wee bit more blue, and a wee bit more red just to kill that off, I should say. So it's more neutral. Then we get in here and we say, okay, there's a lovely dark area here, a couple of wee dark bits there and there. And then of course, our lovely big tree in here. Block that in, and then let's leave a wee bit for the leaves if you want to do it that way. And this will be different on the day, I know, because, here I am looking at a photograph in the comfort of being inside. I don't have, hopefully there won't be wind and rain blowing around, so we won't have those sort of distractions. But there's our darker tones in there. What I'll do is, while I've got this, because I told you the last time I underestimated down here, so I'm going to bang some nice dark shadows in way under this, like one big area like that. Okay, and also there's a big lump of that there, so it's very bold here, big shadows down at the base of that tree. And we'll come back to that in a wee second. What we'll do maybe is we'll come up to the big clumps of leaves here. And we've got to ask ourselves, well, if we're making up a green, what would I say? Is it yellow, east green, blue, east green? So I'm trying to mix, as you can see here, a yellow, tiniest bit of blue in it to come somewhere close to that. Now, if I want to lighten the tone slightly, I might want a little bit of white. Okay. So for the moment,
what I'm going to do is put this in as a block. Okay, and again, the paint's not too thick because it would allow me to come in and change that when the time comes. Tiny wee bit of white there. So I'm trying to look and match as I go, adding wee specks of blue in there just to put that in. So I'm putting a fairly light, warm green in to begin with. And I know there's other greens in amongst that too. But for the moment, we'll just block that in. So we have this nice clump of greens here, and down in here there's a wee lump of them as well. And certainly down here there's a very light area, and this is where it might give me a clue, because this is lovely and light sunlight shining in between here. So if I was to put that in there and there in behind the trees, I know immediately that this color needs to change because that's too close to that. So if I'm saying that this is lovely and light and warm, then this I know is not the case. So even before we go any further, if I was to look at those and say, look, there's not much difference. If you look at the photograph, I hope you'll see a color which actually isn't quite as rich as that. So what I'm going to do is cool it a wee bit. Take that color I was using, bring it down to a little bit more bluish. Okay. And it might be still too vibrant. It might be still too green. So this is where a tiny speck of red goes in there. You can hopefully see that. I don't know if you can. I'll move that up. And as I stir that in, you see how the green goes a bit more earthy, a bit more muddy, a bit more natural possibly, you know. And so I can then go in and put that over. You can see how that's changing the feel of that green there. So I can change quite a lot. Let's do that again. Nice bit of yellow, bit of blue. Don't want it too blue. So I've got the kind of temperature, but it's, as I say, it's a bit too limey, you know, a bit too extreme. So the red will just mucky it up a wee bit. There you go, to make it, in parts anyway, more natural, especially down here. So I can adjust my colors in the ways I'm doing them. I can add white to make them lighter, add red to make the greens deeper and less vibrant. I can add blue. If I add more blue to that, tiny bit more terp, so I'll loosen it a bit. And for instance, I know over here that the greens are a lot bluer than what's over that side. So I'll put a wee bit more blue in there and block that in. All of those are a bit bluer. Gets a bit more yellowy near the top, but you know, just bang these in. See that? So we're getting different variations of temperature in our picture, if you like. And then as I go further up, I can see near the top of my area here a few wee flecks of very light bits where it's catching the sunlight. So let that be a wee bit more yellowy there. And again, don't panic that it's exactly the right color. Make sure that you're making the difference between warm and cold, whether it's exactly it's the same as tone. If you don't get the right shade of grey and the right shade of dark grey, but as long as you know the difference between light grey and dark grey, that one is lighter than the other, then you're at least seeing that. Same here. Make sure you're telling someone that's colder than that. That's a cooler bluer green than that. Whether it's the right green isn't vital at this point in time in your learning. What is vital is you can tell the difference, you know, and that's what you should be critical of in yourself. Now, when we get to the sky area, the light bits in between, obviously we have our blue there. We can make up a white with a tiny bit of blue in it, you know, but again, just a smidgen, because it's really neutral, that color. It's very hard to see blue in it, to be honest, but and if I was to block in these in-between shapes, around here, maybe should be a wee bit more of that there, but I'll just put them in anyway, sorry. And as I fill the gaps, then again, we can start to see a wee bit more of an illusion of space because we're getting light beside slightly darker tones. And there's a lovely line of light down the side of that tree there. See that? Not worried about how accurate the shapes are. What I'm worried about is getting some accuracy in the difference between cold and warm and dark and light. A bit more up there. In fact, it might spread right up into that tree. You can see I could dab a few light bits in there just to let you see. Obviously the paint will mix, so you'll get different shades of yellows and greens and all of that anyway. And up the side of this tree there's a lovely bit of white, or not white, light, beg your pardon. Should turn white down there. Put that all the way down and we can cover it, look. So I'm blocking in dark, light, warm, cold. I'm trying to get it where I see it. And then I can come in and I can tweak it. I can start to say, well, hold on a minute. There's a, over here, for instance, I'm just mixing up some bluish green there. In amongst there, there's a few wee bits that are actually even bluer green, colder green, just in here. One or two in there. So as I break that up, you can start to see that it gives the tree a sense of volume. And we start to get a bit of detail in if you want detail. What we do have is a very subtle bluish green down in here somewhere, just there. So it's not as yellow by any means as the rest of it. And when I put that all in there, it pushes it back. It goes further away. Whereas if I increase the yellows in some of the greens here, so I mean some of the leaves here are nearly virtually yellow. So if I was to lighten them and yellow them up here, make a fair lump of this up here and begin to bang those on, those very bright bits will jump forward. So you can see there, we're now getting feeling of the sunlight catching those and the cooler shadows going back, the darker underneath and the lighter in between and so on. So that is a big basic shaped composition. There's no grass detailed in it. There's not many leaves detailed. There's no wee rocks and fiddly bits. It is a measurement thing of me trying to say, what is a cooler green? Where do I see a warmer green? And, now I need to tweak that. I need to decide, well, that's too cold or that's too warm or that needs to be changed. That's too bright. But I've got my basics down. So be as bold as this. Overcome your obsession or your concern for detail, and you will develop so much more confidence that way.